How do I get published? Well, it first starts with a book. Well, of course you need a book, right? You can't get published without a book, but a lot of people think ahead. They don't think of the now. They haven't written the book yet, and they're thinking of getting published, and they're thinking of all these millions, and it just does not work that way. Okay, for the purposes of this video, we're gonna say that you finished your book. And you finished your first draft, you're ready to go, you feel pretty good about it. It's a big accomplishment, and you're right, it is a big accomplishment. Pat yourself in the back, crack open a beer, do whatever to celebrate this moment, because it's a good moment. But after that, my suggestion would be to let it sit. One of my biggest weaknesses in writing, or just the whole finishing the book process, is my impatience. I want to get on to the next project, I want to start the newest story, and I don't spend as much time being fanatical about my editing as I should be. This has changed over the years. I've evolved my editing process, but it's something to keep in mind. You should always be self-aware of your weaknesses. Now, with your first book, the first draft, I would suggest you leave it alone for a week or two. Don't think about it, work on something else. Just don't work or think about your book. Why is that? For me, the reason is simple. You want to be able to go back at editing your book with a clear mind. You want to approach it like a reader who hasn't read your book yet, and you're trying to make your first impression on them. That's the kind of mindset you want to go into it with, right? You know who you are, and you know that you wrote that book, but you don't want to read it with those eyes. You want to read it with a stranger's eyes. And you want to be hyper-critical. Everything needs to be clear, the sentences need to follow into each other linearly, logically, the paragraphs need to work together. It all has to work. Be super, super critical. So once that run is done, once you've got all your own hypercritical editing done, which should take a while, you want to introduce beta readers into the mix. For beta readers, you want someone who's interested in your genre. Like, I couldn't use my wife, she doesn't like horror, so I'm not going to ask her to read my book, because she's going to immediately go into it with a mindset, I don't like this, which is fair, because you couldn't put a romance in front of me and be like, here, John, read this, because I'm not going to. So they must like the genre that you're writing and that you're having them review. And secondly, you want someone who will be almost mean to you, but in a constructive way. So you want that constructive beta reader who's bordering on mean, because your feelings will be hurt. Not so much mine anymore. At the very beginning they were, but they will be hurt if it's your first book. This beta reader you want to be completely honest, completely hypercritical as well as you. This is the type of friend, or this is the type of person that will say, yeah, you know what? You do look fat in that shirt. Someone who's giving you real world feedback for your benefit. That's who you want as a beta reader. Next step would be to hire an editor. I have not done this yet. I've been pretty fortunate. I've had well over 9 stories of mine published, 5 of them are books, a novella, a book of short stories. My main publisher is Black Rose Writing out of Texas, smaller publisher. They've been great to me, so I have no complaints. But with an editor, they work in the business, they know how to structure sentences and paragraphs and plot pacing and everything. So if you can afford it, because they are expensive, and you do your research properly, like this is a person that edits this type of genre and has worked with these people, I say go for it. Don't put yourself in debt. Like, the way I looked at it was like, if I couldn't pay for my kids' soccer this summer, then I'm not getting that editor. And more often than not, I went and played for the soccer because I couldn't afford both. So that's how it worked. And going forward, I'm definitely getting an editor. I have some money I've put aside just for this, because in the end, my main goal is to either get an agent or a bigger publisher. And I'll go into the reasons why in another video. So once you've got all that done, so what have we got so far? You've been hypercritical of your manuscript. You're gonna wanna go through it 5, 6, 7 times until you're satisfied that you're willing to show it to a beta reader. And then you're gonna give it to that beta reader who's gonna be constructively mean and helpful. And then if you can afford it, don't do anything you can't afford. Get an editor that knows what they're doing. Once that's all done, then you can look for that publisher that you're trying to go for. And I say go for the big one, right? It's interesting the feedback they'll give you, right? So you'll send something to them, they'll say, this is good, but what they're trying to say is that they liked it, but they don't have a market for it at this point. They like it, but it's not as clean as it could be, which is kind of good feedback, which means, you know, you're almost in that ballpark. You're almost being let into the doors. So then you go to the next publisher and you try to work up from there, right? Or work down from there, however you want to view it. The second most important part of this, though, is when the publisher has submission requirements, read them, know them, follow them word for word, and be super hyper specific when you're submitting that manuscript to them. Try to remember it this way, right? You are an investment. If you get a bigger publisher, they're going to be throwing their money behind your work. They're going to give you an advance. They're going to give you book copies, send your books off to reviewers. They're going to do all these things for you, which costs them a lot of money. And they don't know you. The only thing they know about you is what you're submitting to them. And if you can't follow their instructions on their webpage, why would they even bother opening your manuscript? They're not going to. They're just going to say, oh, perfect, because they get thousands of them. So the ones that they're going to review are going to be the ones that have followed their instructions, because at least that person was paying attention. And clarity and attention will always get you in the door. And any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them down below. If there are any questions that you have, remember to like and subscribe. It's the best and free way to help me out. It's free. Change your mind anytime.